Well, the Supreme Court term is over, or is it? We're all led to believe that the Supreme Court's term ends at the end of June. The justices hand in all of their opinions. They clear off their merits docket. They go off to their fancy vacations abroad or to the various seminars that they teach and get paid to teach by various dark money entities. But the work of the Supreme Court actually continues through the summer, and we have seen that happen over these past few weeks with two more staggeringly consequential decisions on the Supreme Court's emergency docket, or its shadow docket, where so much of this court's rulemaking increasingly happens. And these two unreasoned, unsigned orders from the court have sweeping consequences and have greenlit two of Trump's most devastating policies to gut the federal workforce. Last week, if you'll recall, you joined me here to, hopefully you joined me here for a really fascinating conversation with Rushab Sangvi, the general counsel for the American Federation of Government Employees, one of the unions at the center of one of these really important cases. And when we taped that episode, that case was still pending at the Supreme Court. The court had relisted a stay petition from the government a number of times. And soon after that taping, the court handed down its decision in that case, not a formal order on the merits, but a decision on the stay. It granted the stay. I wanted to have Rushab join us again to talk about that ruling, to talk about the implications, the sweeping implications of the ruling, and where this case will go from here. Rushab from AFGE, thank you so much for joining us again. Very sorry to see how this was resolved at the court, but obviously AFGE is pressing forward with its litigation. Tell us about what the Supreme Court did last week and what this case is about for folks that weren't with us last week.
Yes, thank you, Alex. So this is the case that we have been calling sort of the big riff or big reorg case. And it's, it's AFGE is the lead plaintiff. It's AFGE v. Trump is sort of the caption. But it's a massive case with a large coalition of plaintiffs. And, the plaintiffs are unions like us, federal sector unions. But then there's also unions that represent employees in the private sector, and there are unions, there are state, local governments, and a bunch of nonprofits in this lawsuit. And just it's, we're working with a whole team of amazing attorneys on it. The two leads are the firm Altshuler-Burzon, which is amazing, and as well as Democracy Forward. They're leading sort of the litigation piece of this. The case itself is a broad-based challenge to an executive order issued by the Trump administration in February that required agencies to conduct wholesale reorganizations. And this like many other cases that have been percolating makes various arguments, but one sort of essential underlying argument being that Congress created these agencies. The president doesn't have the reorganization authority to reorganize and eliminate, dismantle, modify the duties of these agencies that were created by Congress. And it's actually a very fascinating complaint to read. The complaint talks about even a Heritage Foundation article that discusses how in the past presidents have asked Congress for reorganization authority. Even the Trump administration has, and Congress has sometimes provided it, Congress has sometimes declined it. But now, sort of through Project 2025, the new Trump administration is sort of trampling over sort of what has happened in the past and what we believe the Constitution requires. And sort of just in terms of one thing and a reason it was important to mention how many plaintiffs there are, is sort of the importance of this case and these issues, right? This is preventing the wholesale sort of reorganization of the federal government. We've, several agencies are named as defendants, and what happened was in May, we received a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction enjoining the government at these agencies from moving forward with RIFs. And that resulted in the agencies stopping RIFs that were in progress and the agencies not formalizing or moving forward with RIFs. The injunction was appealed, and the Ninth Circuit denied the government's request for a stay. And then, unfortunately, yesterday, last week, the days blend together. Last week on July 8th, the Supreme Court granted the stay, which is it's a little less than 2 months after we got our first TRO. So, the RIFs were halted or paused at these agencies for 2 months. The Supreme Court's decision, like many of shadow docket decisions these days, is not that long. But what the court said, which, it's not, we're not happy with the decision. We believe the court should not have stayed Judge Ilston's preliminary injunction. But if you read the decision, what it does say is that, while the court believes we are likely to not succeed in our argument that this February executive order was unlawful, the court was clear to say that it was not commenting on the lawfulness of the actual reductions in force and the actual reorganization plans. And then in a concurrence, Justice Sotomayor, made clear that, made that clear and made clear that, the executive order, it had a savings clause. Essentially, it told agencies you have to do all these firings and reorgs consistent with law. And, Justice Sotomayor made clear that that consistent with law piece sort of made the executive order itself potentially pass muster, right? But that doesn't mean that the agencies will actually follow the law. And so that, that provides us some opportunities to continue to pursue this case and pursue actions against the RIFs.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. Thank you. That was really, really helpful. I mean, for one, it's worth noting, as you just did in the context of Sotomayor's concurrence, this is not the normal sort of expected ideological alignment in this case. It's hard to parse it exactly, but it's an unsigned per curiam order, if I recall correctly. So that means no justice put their name on it. We've got the lone Sotomayor concurrence and a lone Ketanji Brown Jackson dissent, really focused on this issue that you hone in on around disempowerment of Congress, disregarding this administration's disregard for congressional statutes. And it seems like Kagan, who did not put her name on anything, seems like she went along probably with the stay, and Sotomayor in her concurrence, they're continuing to sort of grant this administration something of a presumption of regularity in the way they're conducting their business. KBJ seems very clearly not going along with that. She sees very clearly that this administration, even if it says it's doing things consistently with law, it's a pattern at this point that they are not. And then at the same time, this case, like so many others that you mentioned, like it, implicate these big picture questions about how constitutional power is being contested right now, particularly vis-a-vis the executive branch and the Congress with the courts and this Supreme Court increasingly through these shadow docket orders being the arbiter of who gets to have this power. And this is going to be, I think, the nuclear question as we proceed through these Trump years, is whether this court will allow the president to keep taking more and more power from Congress. We haven't had resolution from the court, for example, on these questions of the president's power to impound funds that Congress has appropriated. Obviously, that question has been resolved by the Supreme Court unanimously in Congress's favor before, but now that we're here, who knows how that ends up? And I think it'll be really interesting to see how these questions play out in your case. And I wish you the best as you pursue your arguments. I do want to, of course, talk about the irreparable immediate harm that has resulted from this order. Of course, you'll have your opportunities to make your arguments that this is still illegal in the lower courts and maybe again before the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, the RIFs are proceeding. Folks are losing their jobs. What are you seeing on the ground from folks within your union, your membership? Yeah,
so that's a good question, and it is sort of like it has been with other actions in this administration. It's chaos to some degree. We've seen various agencies do different things. A lot of reporting has been provided about the State Department, right? And so the State Department, they actually, during the pendency of the preliminary injunction, they tried to get around it But then the Judge Ilston had prevented them from moving forward with RIFs during the pendency of the PI, or prior to the PI being stayed. But they went forward last week with issuing reduction in force notices, giving employees 60 days in the case of civil servants, and I believe 120 days in the case of foreign service officers before their separation dates. But then we have other agencies, that have done nothing yet. Again, it's only been a week, but we have, agencies, like the Department of Labor and others, where RIF notices had been issued, and that the date for separation has already passed, but they were stayed from effectuating that separation during that time. They have yet to do anything, and then we have some. We are just getting reporting of HHS, which is, what they're doing is especially cruel, and harmful to. All of these are harmful to the American public, but even, HHS, it's sometimes easier to relate with. HHS, including CMS and NIH, they sent out emails yesterday, 2-paragraph emails saying, your termination was supposed to happen earlier this month. The Supreme, because of the injunction, it was stayed. It was paused. The Supreme Court has stayed that injunction. You're terminated effective the end of the day today. And these are like 2-paragraph emails. It's cruel.
So career people that have been working there, presumably in some cases for decades.
Correct. And these are people at NIH and CMS. And, it's sort of, Congress was talking about how important Medicare and Medicaid is. And now you have, the government just firing people at CMS, without any sort of reasoning here. And so, this is going to have a grievous impact on the American public. And we hope people will understand that. And, again, we are continuing to litigate because we believe that this is unlawful, and we believe there are avenues to continue to litigate in district court and potentially get further relief as we move forward.
And then do you have a sense, have you guys sketched out looking ahead, like, let's say you prevail on the merits here, and time will have passed because the courts move slowly. A lot of these RIFs are happening now. There will be more RIFs along the way. People will lose their jobs. Some of them will have to, they'll find other jobs. They'll do other things. Say you prevail and they get their jobs back. How does that actually get effectuated? Has that ever happened before, where there's been a wholesale set of RIFs that have been challenged and then people got their jobs back and then were reabsorbed into these agencies? Is that something that's being thought through?
We are thinking that through, but this is, and I think just by the nature, and it's detailed in our lawsuit and so many others, what this administration is doing is unprecedented, right? It's a full frontal assault. They are breaking rules that they were not breaking last administration, and so we have to think these things through carefully, because again, this is a new world. But we are hopeful that we will be able to continue to get relief, and that the American public will notice how terrible these actions are.
Yeah, I think that's the critical thing here, right? And particularly for an audience community like we've built here at Midas Touch Legal AF, folks who are paying really close attention to what's going on, particularly on these legal questions, don't necessarily feel like they've got a direct way to make a difference, to express their outrage, to do constructive things to make things better. At the end of the day, it's electoral choices that trickle down into policy outcomes like this, and people's lives are going to get a lot worse, right? People will die because of the bill to defund Medicaid across the board, and because of the reduction in the workforce at HHS and CMS that implements Medicaid programs, right? Like these are vital services and programs that people rely on, and if we don't make the connection between what's happening in the Congress and what's happening in the executive branch, and yes, at the end of the day, what's happening at the courts and who's appointing these judges that reach these outcomes, and incorporating and prioritizing these realities into our electoral choices and our communications within our community and with our representatives in government, then we're allowing it to happen without a fight. And we can, and it's terrific that you guys are litigating this and that you've got such terrific lawyers and groups that are out there challenging this stuff in court, but it really is starting to feel like a whole of society pushback to this very intentional Project 2025 directed effort to break American government and make the people suffer. It's what it's going to take. And it's going to be union and labor that's going to be at the heart of a lot of that. So I'm so grateful for your leadership and in the face of really a bleak situation for your organization, but most importantly for your membership and for the Americans that they serve through their work.
Thank you. Yes, and we're happy to our members are so supportive of this, and so they understand that they're fighting not only for themselves but for Americans, because that's what they get into government service for, right? For serving Americans and for making sure that we have a safe and healthy country.
Terrific. Rushab Sangvi, AFGE, thank you so much for everything, for joining us again here at Midas Touch Legal AF. Friends, thank you for joining us. Hit that like and subscribe button at the bottom. Don't miss these episodes for more terrific conversations with folks like Rushab. And until next time, stay mad, stay motivated, stay mighty. I'm Alex Aronson, signing off.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.